why? All right. The topic tonight, this is actually, I usually do question and answer the first thing, don't I? Not the same thing. Okay. So this Thursday, I'm talking about what we've been talking about all week around excuses and touch on patience as well. So the question of the week is, what excuses am I making? And this is such a valuable question to ask. You should ask yourself basically every day what excuses you're making. If your answer to what excuses am I making, if your answer to that is 0, they can't hear me. Yep, now you can hear me. Okay, so your answer to what excuses am I making is none. I don't make any excuses at all. You are an enlightened being, or you are kidding yourself. And if I had to guess which one of these it is, I'm going to guess it's you're kidding yourself. So the awareness to be able to recognize when we're making excuses or not, this is part of what we should get out of meditation. I'll talk more about that later on. When we look at excuses, and by the way, I'll talk a bit about what I wrote in the newsletter this week. You should have already gotten that. Is that right? Great. So you can read the newsletter later and remember all the stuff that I'm talking about tonight. But the couple of ideas that I wanted to start with are the difference between an excuse and a reason, because most people, when we start talking about excuses, they get real defensive and they're like, I don't have excuses, I only have reasons. And they're all perfectly valid, great reasons. And it's certainly true that for some of the things that you do in life, you have a good reason for it. And it is certainly true that for some of the things that you do or don't do, you're just making an excuse. So how do we tell the difference between those things? Because this is going to become abundantly clear as we start to delve more into this topic and you start to think about it on your own. The most important step, and basically the only thing that you really need to worry about, is recognizing what's an excuse and what's not. Because as soon as you recognize that you're just making an excuse, you're going to probably just be embarrassed enough to start doing the right thing, or you'll eventually kind of come around to it. There's not a whole big process that goes from recognizing the excuse to doing the right thing. So how do we recognize that? The difference between an excuse and a reason. And there are, I'm sure, lots of complicated ways that we could think about this. But what I find is if you just ask yourself this question, this very simple question, it will get right to the point. You will be illuminated instantly. The question is, would I rather be doing something else? So if I'm trying to figure out, am I making an excuse or not? So let's say, for example, we're trying to do the challenge of the week, which is 1,000 squats. And you get home after class and you think to yourself, oh, I should really do those squats. But then you don't do it. And you, in your mind, you have a reason for it. Your reason is, I'm going to watch TV instead. And that seems like a very valid reason to not do squats. It seems like the most important reason that you could ever have. But what will happen is, if you ask yourself, am I not doing these squats because I'd rather be watching TV? If the answer is yes, I'd rather be watching TV, you know that that's an excuse. The reason is more like, I can't do the squats because my doctor told me I can't do squats because of my knee injury or because of my back. That's a reason, right? But if you're trying to get yourself to do something and the thing that's not happening is not happening in lieu of something else that you don't really need to be doing, you're just kind of like, I don't want to do it. I don't feel like doing it right now. I'd rather watch TV. I'd rather take a nap. I'd rather just not do squats. That's how you can get you can easily kind of understand with this idea, this question. If I'd rather be doing something else and it's not something that I really need to be doing. So this can kind of start to get into the realm of like the difference between what I need to do and what I want to do, or what I love and what I like. And we'll find plenty of excuses that will take us away from doing the things that are really important to us and the things that we love, but not necessarily that we like doing, right? Or the things that we need to do, but not that we just kind of feel like doing. So martial arts for me is an example of this. And for some of you, maybe it'll be that, or it's meditation, or it's something that is really important to you, right? And you might find that you're driving home from work, or you're riding on your bike, or you're walking, whatever, and you could turn one way to go to class, and you could turn the other way to go home, and you just kind of, in the moment, this feeling of laziness overcomes you, and you turn the wrong way and you go home. And you know in the moment, if you just pause and give yourself a beat, you know that what you're doing is like making an excuse and being lazy, and you're going home to do something that you like doing, which is sitting on the couch or watching TV or whatever. You're not doing what is, really important to you, to your values. And of course, it's self-serving if I talk about the dojo in this way, but you could talk about this with anything. You really should be going this direction to the restaurant that has the healthy food, but you turn this direction to the restaurant that has the unhealthy food. And that's the way that it happens. It's in that split second. We just feel like doing this. I want this. And so that's the way that you go. So when we can start to put a little bit of space there, and recognize when we're doing something because it's what we like or what we want rather than what we need or what we love, then we're going to really start to make better decisions. So again, meditation is really huge in being able to recognize this. We don't recognize the thoughts that we're having. We don't recognize those split-second choices that we're making, which often don't even feel like choices. They just feel like the natural response is just to be kind of lazy. And recognize this, as human beings, we are really designed to be lazy because efficiency is a biological evolutionary imperative, right? We're not designed to run around and work hard all day and expend all this energy, because we're meant to be as efficient as we can with the calories that we get and to not overextend ourselves. We always got to be ready to run away from a tiger. We always got to be ready to hold on to whatever the energy we have in our body is in case we're not going to eat for the next few days. Now, we don't live in a situation anymore where we're constantly having to worry about dying. So we can kind of go beyond that instant kind of laziness response. So start paying attention to this and recognize what feels natural sometimes is not always the right thing or the best thing for us. So I have an example from my life to discuss that I'm making excuses for myself. Some of you noticed that tax season is over. Not for me. My taxes are still not done. And partly, and the thing is, I have an accountant who does the work. I just have to give him the information that he needs. I still have not done it. They automatically extended the deadline, so I'm not in arrears with the IRS. But it's probably about 1 hour worth of work that I actually need to do to just get the information together to send it. And I'm going to tell you that I have already spent, for me, Beatrice, it's only 1 hour of work that I need to do. You might have 3 hours of work to do. But I will promise you, if you are anywhere between 1 hour and 3 hours and you're like me, you've already spent more than that amount of time making excuses for why you have not done it. You have clearly not been efficient with your time. So I have spent well over an hour making excuses in my mind, shuffling things around, and coming up with reasons why I can't possibly put aside that time to just get the information to my CPA. So this is very clearly not a reason. It's an excuse. Right now, it can be real tricky. I'm very good at making my excuses sound like reasons. I can put some real facts behind it. I can be like, well, I'm going to have to look around in my house to find the pieces of paper that have the information on it. That seems like a reason, doesn't it? That's not a reason. And most of our excuses are something like that. It's like, it seems real smart. This is a very sophisticated excuse that I've created for myself, but it ultimately comes down to just, I don't feel like doing this right now. I'd rather just do something else that's easier. I'd rather do something else that seems more enjoyable. So there is one simple solution that I have for this, and I promise you that I will try it someday with my taxes, but you guys can try it with whatever you have right now, even you, Beatrice, with your 3 hours worth of taxes. Be doing something else that you like even less. So if you know that today's the day you got to get your taxes done, start by doing something even worse. Start by, like, my choices are, I'm going to exercise or I'm going to do my taxes. For me, exercising is way easier. I'd much rather exercise than do my taxes. So for me, it's got to be something even more terrible. I can't even think of something that I would rather not do. But I promise you, for most of the things in our lives that we have been procrastinating on, there exists something that is even worse that you can make yourself do and say, the only thing that I can stop doing this even worse thing for is if I'm going to do my taxes. And this will work for you. I promise. I know, because it's worked for me and it works for everybody. This is actually a sneaky kind of strategy that we give to the parents of some of the kids in class. I had the conversation with a parent just yesterday who was like, we're looking at her daughter out on the mats. Her daughter is having a great time. She's smiling the entire time. She's having a wonderful time, yet she fights her to go from the playground where they're hanging out before class to come to the dojo. And I said, well, there's your problem. You can't be doing something super fun right before class, because it doesn't matter if you're like, we're going to leave this and go to Disneyland. Like, you'd rather just stay there doing the fun thing that you're doing now. And that might be taking a nap in the car. That might mean you're eating a snack at home or watching TV or whatever it is. You can't let them do that. You go from school straight to the dojo, because school is worse than the dojo for sure. You go from, if you go home first, you're cleaning your room. And you go from cleaning your room to, I get to go to class? Absolutely. Enough said. Get me in the car. I can't get there fast enough. So this simple trick is something that you might need to play on yourself. I highly recommend it. I want to talk about patience versus procrastination, because when we start making excuses, a lot of this is procrastination rather than patience. And if you don't know the difference between these two, this is very important. It's very similar, right? If I am procrastinating, it's basically because I don't feel like it. I can push it off. I'd rather do it later. It's something that I really know that I've got to do at some point. Versus patience is like, I'm already working on it, right? Patience is, I did the taxes already. I'm waiting for the refund to come in. Patience is, I'm showing up to class and I'm doing the work to learn the form, right? I'm learning the 108, but I'm not there yet. I'm still showing up. I'm still doing the work. I've got to be patient with the results. It's a huge distinction, because we are very commonly impatient when we're waiting for the results, but plenty patient when it comes to doing the work. I'll be patient. I'll put that off for years if I need to. So we want to get to work now and be okay with the results taking as long as they need to take. That goes into, like, anytime we're setting goals and we just focus on the goal setting is all around the actions that we need to take. We focus on the process rather than the result. So one of the ways that we can tell that something needs to shift is when something just doesn't work. So it may be that I'm procrastinating or I'm making excuses, and it becomes clear because the thing that I'm doing stops working. In martial arts, this is often super obvious, because the thing that I'm trying to do right now in this moment is not working. right? And it could literally be like, the way that I'm moving my knee isn't working because it hurts. My knee goes, ow, right now, I know that's wrong. It could be that, like in jiu-jitsu, I'm trying to make a technique work, but the mechanics are not quite right. And I'm just like, it's not working. Why isn't this working? And so that draws our attention to something that needs our focus. And sometimes we will, if it's not so dire or so obvious, we'll just make an excuse and be like, oh, I guess it's just not working on this person today. But when it happens enough times, when your knee hurts enough times, you'll start to recognize, I can't put this off anymore. I can't make excuses for the way that I've been doing this. I've got to actually make a change. So there's a great story that kind of helps us get into the world of this that I've told many times. There's this is a very sexist story because it's all women that are doing the cooking in this story. I do plenty of cooking in my home, but for the sake of this story, it's a young girl who is about to cook Christmas ham with her mother. And the mom takes out the ham and she cuts the two ends off of the ham and she puts it in the oven. And the little girl asks Mom, why do we cut the two ends off of the ham? And Mom says, I don't know. We always used to do that when I was a kid. So let's ask Grandma. And they call Grandma, and Grandma says, oh, that's because our oven was too small and the ham wouldn't fit in the oven. But our lives are filled with things that we're just like doing because we don't really know why. And sometimes if we just spend a little bit of time thinking about it, the reason becomes very clear. There is no reason. It's a dumb thing that I just keep doing for no reason at all. It's just because I've been doing it this way. And these things are generational sometimes. So if your oven is big enough, you get to eat the whole ham. You don't need to cut the ends off of it. There are so many things like this in our life where we're just doing it the way that it's always been done. And it could very well be that there was a good reason at some point in the past, and now it just doesn't exist that way. There's a more efficient way. There's a better way of doing it. So don't just stick up for time spent. Don't just keep doing it because it's the way that you've always done it and because it's the way that you feel comfortable with. This is really at the core of why we make excuses, is because we're comfortable with it. We're comfortable doing it this way. It's not until it becomes super uncomfortable that the excuses might become obvious. There's nothing really uncomfortable about cutting the two ends off of the ham unless you have to explain it to a child and you actually want to give them a good reason. But there are uncomfortable things that happen in practice and in life all the time. And sometimes it's a physical discomfort, like in class, but sometimes it's just something that becomes so emotionally uncomfortable, or like it becomes so painful that we know that we have to do something about it. So when you get that experience, you start to experience the pain. It's just like pain in class. It's pointing out something to us that needs our attention, and that's a good thing. We don't want to stuff it away and pretend that it's not happening. This is the way that many people deal with pain, is it's like, I just run away from it. We invite the pain in. We, make friends with it. We realize why, we listen to the pain. We have a great conversation with the pain. We understand why it's there and what it's trying to tell us, and then we deal with it. So when you have something like that the only way to move forward is through the pain and shifting something, then we do it. Continuing to put it off is only going to result in more and more pain. So don't resist, invite it in, listen to it, and make the necessary change. Got a few minutes left. So I kind of touched on this, but when we are comfortable and we're making excuses for something, the excuse is basically a function of attachment. So we're attached to the way that we always used to do things. We're attached to the way that we're comfortable with things. And we want to be able to let go. And meditation is definitely all about that. On some level, it's about recognizing the thoughts that we're attached to. It's about recognizing just the kind of ways of being that we're attached to and want to just be able to let those things go. So when we're meditating, You might recognize that you keep going back to the same thought. You keep having this cycle of thoughts. And what we actually do every time we have a thought is strengthen that thought. And when you do that, it makes it more likely that you're going to keep having the same thought. If there's something like you're meditating and you have a song stuck in your head, you do not want to keep having the same song because it makes it more and more likely that it's going to keep showing up. So in meditation, what we're able to do is kind of create a little gap. We have this cycle of thought that keeps kind of feeding into itself, and we create a pause. We focus on the breath and we let go of that thought. And then it's super likely that the thought's going to come back, but now we recognize it. And maybe we recognize that cycle of thought a little bit earlier on, and we're able to kind of nip it in the bud and just let it go and return back to the breath. So this can be fairly obvious in meditation, but we want to be able to take it out into everyday life. When you're going through your life and you start being able to recognize the excuses that you're making, this is partly because of the awareness that you built up with meditation, right? So it's a very common response when you're meditating and you have a thought. The response is, oh, this is bad. Bad that I'm thinking. I'm bad at meditation. This is a bad thing. But it's a good thing. When you recognize the thought, that's good. That means that you are more aware, right? And so then when your response to recognizing a thought is to let it go, you're practicing that very process of letting go. And this is huge. If we can let go of the habitual thoughts, then we can return to the moment. In the moment, that's when you're driving and you can actually create a pause there. And instead of driving home to sit on the couch or driving to McDonald's, you can decide, no, I know that that is an excuse. I know that that's just a habitual, cycle of thought. That's just that's the old way of being. But me right now is turning in the correct direction. I'm going to the dojo. I'm going to the salad restaurant, Tender Greens. And that pause is huge. So much of our experience of life is just like, it feels like we are just habitually responding to things. So when we create the pause, then we can actually create new habits, and then you've really got something. If you do the right thing enough times, then you don't have to think about it anymore. Now, every single time you get to that intersection, you turn the right way, right? Every single time you go to throw a punch, you're making your fist do the right thing. And this is kind of like an interplay between mindfulness, being in the present, and creating the kind of habits that we want. Usually, we're not mindful, we're not in the moment, we don't have the habits that we want. All we have is the bad habits that we don't want. So we create a pause, we bring it back to this moment, and then start creating the good habits. So meditation is all about that. Creating the good habits that we want to have with the way that we're thinking, with the way that we're able to be in the present, let go of thoughts, focus on the breath, and kind of create that pause. And then choose who you want to be. Choose the actions that you're taking. Choose the habits that you're making. Sit comfortably. So you want to have a good posture and a good position to sit in when you're meditating. This is part of the good habits that we're creating. So I like to sit Seisan kneeling, but cross-legged works fine too. If you need to sit with your knees up, just be careful. If your knees are above your hips, there's a good chance that your legs are going to start to fall asleep. You can also even turn that thing on its side if you want to, and then you can kind of sit on it the like widthwise. Yep, and it'll kind of crush down. That'll be easier for you that way. So this allows us to keep our spine straight and not let the legs fall asleep during a longer meditation. We're only going to do about 15 minutes tonight. Your hands are here upturned at the hips. They can be sliding down if your back gets slouchy, so don't let that happen. Your hands are here and your shoulders are rolled back. Close eyes. Your eyes are slightly upturned. You can think of looking at the third eye. You can think of looking up in the distance at a spot that's slightly above your eye height, but we don't want to be looking straight ahead or down. So when we raise the eyes, that is associated with a raised consciousness. You'll notice, like when you start to remember something, you try to remember something, your eyes naturally raise up. So that is kind of taking you out of the everyday consciousness where you are very much in the body and bringing you up to letting go of the sensation of your body, the aches and pains and itches. And from here, you're just going to relax and watch the breath. So when your mind wanders, you start to feel the itches in your body, let that go, focus back on the breath. When your mind wanders and you start to have some cycle of thoughts, as soon as you recognize it, let it go and come back to the breath. And you can create a little pause in that cycle of thought by just saying the word thought in your mind. Please don't say it out loud. And that is a way of kind of distinguishing or separating yourself from the thought, from the cycle of thoughts, without creating judgment. You're not telling yourself that the thought is bad or that you are bad at meditating because you're having a thought. You are just labeling it. There's no judgment. It's just a fact, thought. And then that allows you to let it go much more easily, as opposed to resisting or starting to follow down a different cycle of thought where you're beating yourself up for having thoughts. So try that today. When your mind wanders, just label that thought and gently come back to the breath as many times as it takes.